Hey everybody, I'm Greg Soul and welcome to another CIQ demo. Today I'm going to be showing you how to use Ascender to do, say, Linux OS migrations in our recommended way. So in previous demos, I showed you how to use the Elevate tool to do that, right? So to going from like CentOS 7 to Rocky 8. In this one, I'm going to be showing you, again, our recommended method of going from CentOS 7 to Rocky 9. But this is any migration where you're going from major version numbers of an enterprise Linux. And that is to build up a brand new machine, virtual machine, whatever it happens to be. So in my case, I'll build up a brand new Rocky 9. I will back up the configurations and data from my old server and I will push them to the new one. And Bob's your uncle, we're done, right? It sounds simple, but how do we actually do that in an automated fashion? And so that's what I'm going to be showing you today. So let's start by firing off my automation inside of Ascender. First, I'm going to come to the template section. I've already created everything inside of here, right? So I've created the inventories, which is a big list of all my hosts I could operate against. In there, I've got hosts that are in a specific group that are ready for migration. And so I'm really just going to be running against that migration group. So I'm going to look for manual, because I call this manual migration, because I mean, essentially that's what we're doing. We're doing the manual migration, but we're doing it in an automated fashion. So I have these playbooks, right? And hidden here in Ascender, we call them job templates, right? So a job template essentially does kind of a discrete action. It usually performs one thing, and we create something called workflows that allow us to tie multiple of those job templates together. So I have all of my little steps here in job templates, and then I've got my workflow here. I'll hit the rocket ship right here to launch it, and it's going to fire off my automation. Now you can see we immediately jump into kind of the workflow visualizer in the job section that show you all the little steps in the process as they progress. Now, rather than sit and watch this automation kind of go through, because it takes a little bit to do all these pieces, I'm going to walk through and explain some of the various sections and take a look at some of the playbooks. So I made some very crude drawings to kind of help illustrate what's going on, right? So we have our old VMware server. In this one, it's named something like Greg-CentOS 7. And what I'm going to do, very first thing is I'm going to back up those configs. And this is the process by which I do that. I run a playbook here that is discover backup. And in here, I'm going to connect to my migration host, right? In the group migration hosts here. And I'm going to pull a list of all the RPMs. So there are modules in here that you could do that with, but I found that those modules don't always interact well with CentOS 7. But if I run the RPM command, it works every time, no matter what I'm operating against. So I'm going to pull a list of all of the applications installed, right? Pull all of those RPMs. Next, I'm going to pull the service facts, which essentially tells me, hey, here's all of the services, whether they're enabled, running, like it kind of gives me state on all that stuff. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to the backup server, right? That server that's kind of sitting off to the side. And I'm going to create a folder structure for each one of these servers that I'm going through. Now, at the very bottom, you can see here, I'm actually looping through all of the installed packages, and I'm looking for, hey, is one actually the Apache package, right? So you would need to create little task files for all the various types of applications you have, right? Because each one is going to have different requirements, right? My Apache will have, say, configs in specific folders as well as data, and I'll need to pull that off and push it somewhere, right? So if you are running, say, JBoss or an FTP server, right? Those things are going to be unique to those applications. So you create a little task file to grab that information and back it up. And you would have kind of an entry, copy and paste after that, that's just matching for whatever application. So here's the Apache backup task file, right? Nothing too crazy in there. Essentially what I do is I am connecting in and I am grabbing the configurations and I'm archiving them. So I'm putting them in a zip file, if you will. I'm grabbing them and then I'm pushing them over to the backup server. I'm doing the exact same thing for the data files, grabbing them into an archive, pulling them and then pushing them over there. Like nothing too crazy, pretty straightforward in the end, right? Because a simple application, I don't have to do a whole lot there. So pretty straightforward. The very next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect into my VMware environment and I'm going to provision a new virtual machine. And after that virtual machine comes up, I'm going to then take the IP address that it got, and I'm going to push that into the inventory, right? So what is an inventory? Again, a big list of all the hosts we can operate against, and I want it in the inventory because I'm working in a workflow, right? And as it passes from one job template to the next, it can reference that inventory to actually be able to get to this host, right? So I've got that new host in there, and it's ready to go. The next thing I want to do is I want to connect into the backup server, pull those configs and data, and stick that in the new VM. And let me show you that in the playbooks really quick. So I am doing the restore playbook. That's what I'm calling. In here, it's doing everything somewhat in reverse order. So essentially, I connect in, and I'm first setting up this restore server variable. And that's going to be the new server that I just provisioned. And really, it's the name of the old one, but with new dash at the beginning. It's nothing very complicated. Obviously, you would customize that to meet whatever you want in your environment. I mean, you could also, I guess, just stick it in a different folder structure inside your VMware, or if you're doing it in cloud, I mean, you get it, right? Customize it for your environment. This is just what I'm doing. Next, I'm going to be doing the very similar stuff where I am looking in that backup location on the backup server for this inventory, and I'm pulling just a list of all the files that I backed up from it, right? So if I did Apache, I'll have Apache files. If I did FTP, I'll also have FTP files in there. So I'm just getting that big list. And now what I'm doing is I am looping through that list of files, and I'm looking for something that's indicative of I did the Apache backup, right? So as you can see here, inventory hostname plus httpd.cgz, that's the Apache backup, right? So it did that. If it was an FTP server, I would have another entry down here that's just looking for something from my FTP server. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, the restore procedure for Apache is very similar to the backup, only with a couple of additions. So here, I'm installing Apache, right? Got to make sure it's on my fresh, clean server. Next, I'm grabbing those archives, whether it be the configuration or the data. I'm extracting that information. And then at the very bottom, I am starting that service and tell it to be enabled. So it's going to start on boot. So nothing too crazy there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to suspend the old virtual machine, right? So I've got the new one up. I've got all of my configurations restored on it for all of my various applications. So I can pause that old one, essentially is what I'm doing. I am not deleting it. So I would recommend in your environments, if you are doing this migration strategy, do not immediately delete the old VMs. Keep them there for a little while, just in case. I am a crazy paranoid person. So I come from environments with insane SLAs. And so I also have a deep-seated fear of data loss. So I would say very much just keep it suspended. I would say give it 30 days at least. Leave it suspended for 30 days. As long as you have the disk space and you can absorb that, then I would say go for it. If you don't, maybe slow that retention period down, or maybe slow your migration period down a little bit, right? That way you can kind of move through those services a little bit safer. Now that that old one is paused and it's offline, you can start doing tests, and in the automated fashion as well, right? So if I am installing Apache, I want to run some specific tests against that web server, right? Check the HTTP ports, the HTTPS port, make sure you can pull a page, make sure that page is returning specific information. If it's FTP, maybe push a file, maybe pull a file, right? Whatever it is you want to do to test in this thing. Probably do some maybe pings and trace routes from various locations, or when you're doing your web server test from some nodes outside. Whatever that looks like, just bake those tests in so that they're automated on the tail end as well, right? You don't want to have to manually do all of that as well, because it's crazy. Make it as automated as possible. Excellent. So I can see everything migrated properly, right? Here's my backup. Then I do my provision, my new. Here's the restore procedure. Here is suspending the old one, and then my node testing. Now, if I was curious about what happened in any of these, I could click on them individually. So I could say the restore process. I can click on this, and it will give me detailed information of the output right here. So I can go back and I can see the output, and here's my new Greg CentOS 7 box. I can click on that. I can see actual detailed information of all the things that it pushed. So here it was doing the install. And I did the delegate too, right, to get to that new host. And so I'm just going to copy its IP address right there. So I'm going to open a new tab and browse to that IP address, and let's see. Sure enough, the test page is up. On that CentOS 7 box, I never actually put a web page. I just had it up and running with the test page. So it actually took the test page and then shoved it onto this new box as well. So you can see that it's up and running and operating. So that is a pretty succinct way to migrate your machines. Not only are you doing the migration, you still have the old VM. It is paused, and I would suggest you do that. You also have backups of your configuration stored on the backup server. Now, how could you modify this? You could actually do the config and data push directly from the old server to the new server if you wanted to, right? You could just do the transfer directly between those. While that is a good, usable solution, I tend to go for kind of belt and suspenders. That's why I like the web server kind of backup piece, so that I actually, or rather just the backup server piece in general, so I can pull those configs and data and then have them stored in kind of a backup location just for safety. Also, you could do this in mass. I would suggest doing it on chunks of machines at a time, especially like machines, right? So if you're doing a bunch of web servers, I would say do those in chunks and just verify and make sure everything looks good. Now at this point, using this methodology, you actually have kind of configuration as code, which is really cool. So that means if I want to rebuild some new servers, I've actually got the methodology to do it. I don't have to do the migration, right? So this is good step one for the migration piece, right? But that's restore playbooks. As long as I have my configuration stored somewhere, probably in a Git repository moving forward, I can use this same methodology to just build out new infrastructure, right? So I need a new cluster of web servers. I can just use the automation, push that, because I'm storing all those configurations as code, which is really great. So if you ever have any problems, say a machine gets compromised, you can pull it offline, move it over to the side, right? Put it in some kind of sandbox and then just auto provision a new one. It's also really good for moving things from test dev into prod, right? Kind of that I've got all of my configurations stored in code and I can push along the way. It makes those things very easy as well. So this is great for migration from, say, CentOS, which is a big one folks are focused on right now, CentOS over to Rocky 9 or Rocky 8, if you will. But also you can move from any enterprise Linux over to Rocky using this methodology. And if you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear it. If you would like help with migrations, that is one of the things that we have become experts in, is migrating from one set of systems over to our Rocky infrastructure. So we're happy to come in there, help you build out the infrastructure, help you build out all of your playbooks, your templates. We even have some cool applications internally that help all of that process flow very smoothly, and we'll have a leave behind where you have an ascender and configuration as code ready to go in your environment. So again, questions, comments, throw them at me. And if nothing else, we'll see you next time. Bye.